And we are live with another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside once again by Andrew Johnson, as we recap this past weekend's first week of the National Football League season. A very interesting start to week number one for the NFL. Some thrilling games on both Thursday and Friday. A lot more jam-packed action on Sunday. We had the Monday Nighter a couple days ago between the Jets and the 49ers. So a lot to unfold going into week number two of the NFL season. Obviously, still early to tell who are going to be the clear-cut favorites to make it to the Super Bowl at the end of the season. Johnson, I know you are pretty much riding high after last Sunday. Otherwise, for me, Sunday was probably one of the worst days I've had in my experience as a football fan, being a fan of a certain team in New York.
What about like your first football experience? And let's see, when's the last time the Giants played? Early January, about 8 months.
Yeah. Well, you got to think about it also. I mean, just going back off of that quickly, because I really don't want to put much input into their debacle on Sunday. I think Sunday was, I don't want to say it was as bad as last year, because last year there was a lot more hype considering it was the year after a playoff spot and they were expecting high expectations. And then to lose 40-0 on Sunday Night Football to your division rival certainly didn't help. This game was pretty much the same, in which, I don't know, there's definitely not as big expectations going into it, but it was just an all-out disaster considering that it was a team that they could have beaten, and unfortunately they didn't get the job done. But for your team, they got their job done on Sunday. We'll recap that a little bit later on in the show. But any takeaways you have from week number one before we dive in to some of the games that we saw?
Yes, I don't think you can classify us as New York sports media, but we do have a podcast in the New York tri-state area, in the New York City area. New York sports media has. Listen, I don't listen to
WFAN.
Yes, WFAN. Thank you. Very often, right? I usually listen to
It's
it
just
on
about
the
the
way to
Giants
work
score.
and on the way to it's not about the Giants score, but on the way to work and coming home from work, right? The way they were describing them in probably the couple hours a week I will listen to them, they were describing like they were the second coming of like the 1985 Chicago Bears. Like, that's the way they've been hyping up this team. Like, oh, yeah, there's upgrades at every position. There's expectations should
Defensively,
be
yeah.
higher. And, like, they were, like, hyping this team up, saying, oh, yeah, Danny Dimes has all these weapons now. Like, if you had just never listened or knew anything about football and this was the first thing you heard, you would think that this team was going to go undefeated the way the New York sports machine hypes these teams up.
Well, remember what I said in our preview for this season. I said the Giants, on paper, did a lot of good things in the offseason. Yes, you might clown them for what happened with Saquon Barkley, but at the end of the day, it allowed them to get guys like Brian Burns and other players to, give more assets to that way they could upgrade the team more and fully. But I
Which,
said
by
during
the way, Saquon was never going to do that. He had a spoiler
no,
alert. He had a really good game. He would never
no, he
do
had
that in New
he had
York.
a monster game. Absolutely not. Listen, here's what I say: the offensive line for the Giants did not look bad on Sunday. They were all right. The guy behind them is where the problem is. And I said during our preview, I said the Giants on paper season is going to rely on this on Danny Jones. I was almost calling him Danny Dimes, but he does not deserve that nickname anymore. Probably has never deserved it, to be fair. And that was the biggest concern. You knew that going into the season that was going to be your number one concern going into it, and obviously it showed out on Sunday. He had a really horrible game. The offense scored 6 points, and the defense, yes, might have given up a bunch of points, but there were some possessions where the Vikings had, other than one big drive where it was a 99-yard touchdown drive, which was probably the worst the defense looked in that game. But other than that, it was pretty much short field for the Vikings to take advantage and score some touchdowns in that game, which, like I said, debacle of the game for the Giants, and I don't really want to go any further than we've already gone into that game. So with that being said, let's go into the other games that, in my opinion, mattered more considering how that game went for New York. And let's start off with the Thursday night game. Of course, the season opener for this 2024 NFL season. And boy, did we get a pretty good game in this one, Johnson, between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens. We knew the stakes going into it. The rematch of last year's AFC Championship game. And a lot more drama once again into this game. Obviously, we saw the debut of Derrick Henry for the Ravens, made a nice impact on the opening drive with a rushing touchdown. Then we saw another new impact for the Chiefs as Xavier Worthy, the rookie receiver out of Texas, he got himself his first NFL touchdown on the first drive of the game for the Chiefs. So both offenses got started up pretty quickly in this game. Then we kind of saw the defenses play a part in the second quarter. The Chiefs had a 3-point lead going into the break. Pacheco would add a touchdown in the third quarter, gives the Chiefs a 10-point lead. But then we saw the Isaiah Likely show in the fourth quarter, a 49-yard touchdown to put the Ravens within 3. We then saw Xavier Worthy get another touchdown, his second of the night, gives the Chiefs back a 10-point lead. The Ravens would make it a 7-point game, and they would actually, in fact, get the football back with about under a minute to go in this game to try to tie it at 27. They were able to get down the field, got a big catch from Rashad Bateman to set themselves up in the goal line. And there's two key plays in this game, Johnson, that decided this one for Kansas City and Baltimore. Third down, you have a wide open Zay Flowers missed in the end zone by Lamar Jackson. So if that doesn't happen, obviously the next play won't matter whatsoever for this one. And the next play resulted in a great catch by Isaiah Likely. Was originally called a touchdown on the field. After further review, they looked back at it. Isaiah Likely by just a toe, kind of similar to what happened to Kevin Durant and the Nets in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Bucks a couple years back in the NBA. The exact same scenario. By just a couple of inches, it cost the Ravens the game-tying touchdown, which they also would have went for 2 to try to get the win afterwards. But it cost them a chance, and it cost them this game as the Chiefs hang on by a thread, 27-20, to kick off their start to a potential three-peat this season.
Now I'm going to sit here and complain about how the officiating was. It was very one-sided.
A lot of illegal formations. That was a very key point in this game.
I get you want to set the tone for the season, say, oh, we are going to call this, yada, yada, yada. That's great. If it's an illegal formation, that's fine. You call it. But when you have the same Chiefs offensive lineman do the exact same thing and you're not calling it, that's bias. And I'm sick of this Chiefs bias. It's coming down from the top. It's coming down from Roger Goodell. He needs someone to be the next Tom Brady in the worst way. He's going to shred whatever little integrity he has left that he's already ruined the game of football with.
I was going to say, he has no integrity at this point.
Yeah, what little integrity he has, he's having wife beaters and alcoholics that get caught drunk driving. People that get into bar fights. Just the worst kinds of people employed in this league. And he really has no integrity left. He doesn't really have a moral fiber to stand on. But when you're going to grandstand this, and this is going to be... Because here's the thing. At the end of the day, this is a distraction, right? Because any press is good press. And Roger Goodell knows, because by sitting here complaining about the refs, it takes away from other things. It takes away from the fact that Tyreek Hill is a wife beater. It takes away from the fact that Alvin Kamara has gotten into domestic disputes. And then, obviously there's way, way more than those two guys.
Tyreek Hill
way more.
Has been a big topic of conversation in the NFL the last couple of days, which we'll get into a little bit later on.
Yeah, well, I really haven't seen the full video or anything like that.
I saw the video. It's not. Tyreek is fine. Maybe he could have handled it a little bit early. Like if it was handled a bit earlier, better by Tyreek, maybe that would have escalated to the way it did. But
I think my take on the Tyreek Hill thing is he was within his. I'm not sure if he handed the license and registration. I don't know what the state law is in Florida, but I know the state law in a lot of places. If you hand them the license and registration, you've done your insurance, license, registration. You could roll up the window. That's it. You may not like it, but that's the law. You can write as many tickets as you need.
I'll go into it quickly because we were going to discuss it a little bit later on, but I think it's better to discuss it now. The story, looking back at the video, the officer goes up to the window. He kept tapping on it, and Tyreek was getting pissed about it. And they kept asking him for the license and registration. He kind of wasn't cooperating. He kept just saying the same thing, like, don't hit my window, don't hit my window, don't hit my window. And then he got taken out of the car. Then the whole excessive stuff happened with the officers. There was a point where he was telling the officers, like, be careful, I just had surgery on my knee and everything. So, like, that's another concern because obviously, this is like, and keep in mind, folks, this is literally a mile out from where the stadium is. So, like, this is happening right by where the Dolphins play. And then Calais Campbell tries to help him. He gets arrested at one point. John O. Smith tried to help. Like, it was a whole fiasco that happened this week. It led to an officer getting
unpaid administrative leave, as they put it. So he's pretty much suspended.
And they're asking and now Tyreek and the rest of the Dolphins, I think, at this point, are asking for the guy, all the officers, maybe. I don't know about all of them, but maybe a bunch of them at least, to get fired. So it's a really bad look. But I mean, after what Tyreek did in the game against for the Dolphins, which we'll recap, he still had a monster game despite having to deal with that BS or whatever, however you want to look at it beforehand in that one. But going back to this game, yeah, the biggest takeaway was early on the Ravens kept and it sucks because this is what happened last year in the playoffs too. The Ravens kind of shooting themselves in the foot, and that's why they lost that game against Kansas City. And this one was the same, but again, I feel like we're in a new stage now because this is a new rule they implemented with this illegal formation, and this wasn't the only game that we saw it in this week. It happened in the Packers and Eagles game. It happened a bunch on Sunday as well. So this is a new rule that the NFL is still adjusting to. And when your All-Pro left tackle Ronnie Stanley is the one that he was the one that was getting the brunt of it most of the time because he has a certain stance that he does when he lines up to play tackle. And now you realistically can't do that anymore because if you're not lined up with the rest of your offensive lineman, if you're like a step back, they're going to call that illegal formation. So that's what kept getting called, especially on that first drive of the game. That's why that first drive took so long because there were so many penalties called on Baltimore. And to their credit, they were able to convert on third downs. But at the end of the day, that really killed them because of penalty yardage. And then the Chiefs, sometimes maybe we get called against them, but not all the time as you would have expected.
Yeah, so again, we're going to talk about the refs and we're going to ignore the actual on off the field
It
antics of
sucks.
the NFL. Listen, I have my beef with Adam Silver in the NBA, but he really squashes that. Miles Bridges, he is booed out of arenas. I was there when he suited up the season after his suspension was reinstated. And his first game in the Garden, he was booed out of a place. And when I mean he whenever he was touching the ball, he was getting booed. You don't see that stuff uh, with other guys that have similar. I don't even say issues. They're not issues. It's they're crimes. It's but to call them I guess they're technically criminals, but it just paints the league in such a bad light. And Roger Goodell is a master of media, and he knows by sitting here talking about the refs and the poor officiating, it sheds light off the field or away from the off the field issues and rather just on the officiating and the integrity of the game. And I've kind of gone way overboard on this, and that's all I'm really going to say at this point because it was a poorly officiated game, and if the Chiefs barely won off if he had a size cleat that was half a size
Yeah, I mean,
smaller,
like the call on the
and you
touchdown was
bear
the correct call.
yeah, that was the correct
That's
call.
the correct
No one's
call.
gonna, no one is ever gonna
Like
dispute that.
it just sucks because
But the
that
fact
was in
that
the same catch.
the fact like it was officiated up until that point, the Chiefs would have gotten blown out. It wouldn't have been close.
I think the biggest also concern for Baltimore, and again, it's only week one, but they the first drive of that game, you saw Derrick Henry run the ball very efficiently, and I think he had maybe 13 carries the rest of the game. I think he had 9 on the first drive or something like that, and he only had 13 the rest of the day. Lamar Jackson did pretty much the brunt of the running for them in this one.
They can figure it out.
Again, like I said, this is the reason that they lost that game last year in the playoffs was because they didn't run the football a lot. And they did in this one, but that was from the quarterback position. So they need to get Derrick Henry involved. And again, it's still week one. You can definitely get him involved. He's learning a new system. I'm sure they'll fix it out as season goes on. But come playoff time, if this happens again, these two teams meet again, they have to get Derrick Henry the ball a lot more because they don't want to be put in this spot where, oh, look, we have to go down the field in 40 seconds and we have to try to score a touchdown to tie the game or maybe even win it if we go for 2 and we lose on a game of inches because you don't want that to happen. So it is what it is for that game. But after that Thursday night game, then we had our Friday night game, which is still very unusual to say, but game in Brazil, the first game in Brazil between the Packers and the Eagles. And this was also another thrilling game despite the conditions of the field, which is a very big talk of this game. And I think this is one of the things I saw a lot being talked about once this game was over. Big games out of Jordan Love, Jaden Reed for the Packers, as well as Josh Jacobs in the second half at least. Jalen Hurts was on and off in this one. Two bad interceptions that really hurt the Eagles, a couple of Eagles drives. But and also AJ Brown, I shouldn't forget his performance as well. But you talked about it when I was talking about the Giants and Saquon Barkley. I mean, I hate to say it, but absolutely phenomenal performance with Saquon this one. Receiving touchdown, 2 rushing touchdowns, 109 yards rushing behind that Eagle O-line. He looked very good in that offense. as the Eagles were able to hold on for a 34-29 win. But the biggest takeaway from this game, Johnson, Jordan Love. He gets injured on the second to last play of the game in a play where it looked like originally that the Packers were fearing the very big worst of an ACL tear. A helmet, it looked like, collided with his kneecap, which I thought for sure that was going to end maybe Love's season, which would have been tragic for Jordan Love because this is a guy that's a potential MVP candidate going into the season at least. And the good news for the Packers is it looks like I think they ruled it as an MCL sprain, so he's probably out for 3 to 4 weeks. So that's definitely the best case scenario for the Packers. They'll go to Malik Willis, the former Tennessee tight end quarterback, for the next couple of weeks. I don't know how that's going to all unfold. If you're a Packer fan, you have to be at least thankful that it's only an MCL sprain because it could have been way worse. But their chances now of the playoffs, if they start the season 0-4, it's going to be tough because it's not like there's any gimme games right now for them, especially with the backup quarterback for the next couple of weeks. So I'm curious to see if they stick with Malik Willis. There's rumors of maybe they signed Ryan Tannehill to be a bridge gap, if maybe a mentor for Malik until Jordan Love comes back, because we've already seen that in Tennessee. But I'm curious to see what Green Bay does in the next couple of weeks. They take on the Colts upcoming on Sunday in Malik Willis' first start. I want to say it's his first start in the NFL. I don't remember if he started
I
a
think
game.
he started in Tennessee.
Did he start a game in Tennessee?
I'm almost positive. Give me 1 second, I
Yeah.
can let you know. I'm almost positive he started a game in Tennessee.
But regardless, in this game, it's still, listen, it was a good game overall between these two teams. I think the
he
biggest.
started 3 games in Tennessee.
He did start 3 games? Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure because I remember him coming in a bunch of games where it was, after an injury or they just wanted to make a QB change for Tannehill. I wasn't sure if he fully started.
They were not memorable games. He averaged 45 yards a game, I think.
Yeah. And
Not
obviously,
45. He didn't average many, though.
I remember seeing the stat. He had like 3 interceptions, no touchdowns going into when he threw that final pass or tried to throw that final pass in the game against the Eagles. But any takeaway you had from this game, despite what people have been saying about the field conditions and obviously the Jordan Love injury that happened afterwards?
Yeah, the Eagles, Saquon used half his touchdowns already for the year.
Giants fan, I guess I have to hope for that.
He's not going to be on pace to hit 54
I mean,
touchdowns.
listen,
That's
if you
crazy.
drafted him in fantasy, you had a very nice week 1.
Yeah, it's a great week 1.
Points.
And historically speaking, Saquon is good for maybe, I don't know, 9 to 10 touchdowns a year, usually, on a good year.
Yeah, I think around like 9 to 11, is a good number.
So say 8. So say 8 to 12. Then somewhere split the difference. If he already has 3 touchdowns, unless he's going to have an insane year where he gets like 18, 19 touchdowns, he's going to slow down.
As long as the biggest thing is he's got to stay healthy. He's obviously had those injury concerns in the past. If he stays healthy, I think he's got a great opportunity to exceed that number easily because he's unfortunately. It's no secret they have a better offensive line in Philly than in New York, so he's going to have the opportunity to do so. And this was a good test to see how this offense is going to look for the Eagles for the potential season. The only concern is you're going to hope Jalen Hurts is at least going to play a little bit better because he didn't really look too hot in this game. And I mentioned the 2 bad interceptions that he threw and almost cost the Eagles this game entirely. So they're grateful to definitely come out of this game escaping with the win. And you got to wonder if Jordan Love doesn't get hurt on that, second to last play, if he is in for the final play of the game, do the Packers maybe pull off a miracle and get the Hail Mary at the end of the game to win? It's a game of what ifs. That's kind of how the NFL is sometimes. So we'll see how Green Bay adjusts with Malik Willis starting for the next 3 to 4 weeks or how potentially even further, depending on how the diagnosis is for Jordan Love. But now we go into the Sunday slate, Johnson, and we had the start of a new potential, a new quarterback change for not only one team, but for both teams in this game. The quote unquote Arthur Smith game, which is not a good title for this game, but these two teams have one thing in common, and that is Arthur Smith, and I guess you could say Cordell Patterson as well. As the Pittsburgh Steelers went into Atlanta to take on the Atlanta Falcons, the debut of Kirk Cousins as an Atlanta Falcon quarterback, and also the debut of Justin Fields as the starting quarterback for the Steelers, as Russell Wilson, who was originally slated as the starter for the Steelers, got injured before going into this game. So Justin Fields got the start. I think he's going to be starting again on this upcoming Sunday, so he'll be starting. Unfortunately, Johnson, for that game, that was supposed to be the Russell Wilson revenge game because they were going to Denver this week. So we won't get to see that this upcoming weekend, which I don't know if I'm upset about it, but it would have been a nice storyline going into that game. But anyway, going back into this one, Justin Fields didn't look too terrible. 6 incompletions, didn't really have to do too much. The Steelers had a very strong running game in this one. But the biggest takeaway was the Steelers' defense, which has obviously been a main staple for them for decades now. TJ Watt, monster game. Let's see, he had 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. I think he forced a fumble, recovered a fumble, did pretty much everything you could ask for out of him. We saw a couple of interceptions thrown by Kirk Cousins in this one, I believe 2 in this one, which not a good start for his tenure in Atlanta. 2 interceptions that, on paper, if you look back at the game, were pretty bad. So that's definitely a concern for the Falcons. I think the only bright spot the Atlanta had in this one, Johnson, we saw Bijan Robinson. I think, 18 carries, 68 yards. Doesn't look great on paper, but at least he's getting the bulk carries out of that backfield. And we saw a Kyle Pitts touchdown in week number 1. So maybe the Falcons sticking it to their old head coach, I guess. Who knows? But despite not scoring a touchdown in this game, the Steelers actually get the win on 6 field goals, winning by a final of 18-10 to start the season 1-0. And they are, at the end of the week, the only 1-0 team in the AFC North.
Yeah, the Steelers looked really good. Justin Fields,
he was all right.
I mean,
67 rushing yards too. I forgot to mention that.
I thought he looked really good out there, especially in a non-Matt Canada offense. Obviously, you want him to pass the ball a little bit more. His yards per attempt were, a little bit lackluster, so it wasn't really throwing.
This is what
he was making the safe passes, though.
Right, but this is what he should have been doing to begin with. I think you shouldn't be forcing him to, yes, he has an arm, but you shouldn't be forcing him to try to throw it down the field as often like that. When you
the
have
offensive line also gave him a lot more time this time around.
Yes, exactly. If you have, playmakers around you, which remember, when he had the Bears, your best playmaker, he didn't get it until, what was it, year 2 or 3, maybe? I think it was like the year 3 when they got DJ Moore. And when you look at that, remember how they started last season where they kept trying to throw the football, and they weren't adjusting to what Justin Fields was going off of, which was, run the option a lot more. Just run with Justin and see what happens. And the Steelers kind of did that in this game. 14 rushing attempts for 67 yards to combine with what Najee Harris did. That's a good 1-2 punch, at least from your quarterback running back duo. So that's what the Steelers need to do. I mean, I don't know if it's probably going to change if Russell Wilson starts. I don't expect them to run this many times with the quarterback, but expect Justin Fields. And they've said that maybe sometimes expect a 2 quarterback set where Russell Wilson's at under center, but Justin Fields might set up as a running back just to get try and trick the defense and see if he maybe potentially runs. So this is an early pretest to see what the Steelers do for maybe the rest of the season. Like I mentioned, the biggest takeaway for this game probably is how badly Atlanta played offensively, especially behind center Kirk Cousins, because a lot of people clown the Falcons not only for paying Kirk Cousins that money, but then taking Michael Penix in the draft with their first round pick. So I don't know, but they were the favorite going into the season to win the division.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I always thought that Justin Fields was going to be the better quarterback over Russell Wilson. So if he starts off like 3-0, 4-0, and Russell Wilson's healthy, he might get Drew Bledsoe and just say, you got to sit on the bench, bro.
Yeah,
that'll be it.
That's a great point that you bring up. I'm curious if they stick with Fields. If they start the season 2-3-0, I don't know how long Russell Wilson's going to be out. I think they've already announced him out for this week. So Justin Fields is starting in Denver this upcoming week. But if he starts 2-0, 3-0, whatever, I don't see why they wouldn't just stick with him at this point, because you can't really mess around. And it's not like the good thing for the Steelers is it's not like they're paying Russell Wilson a lot of money. They're paying him $1 million. So they could get away with it. It's not like they're, if it was Denver where they're paying him an absurd amount of money, so they have to start him. They could get away with this and easily just start Justin Fields for a duration. And if he starts to, play bad, oh, look, you have Russell Wilson, and not a great, thing to say sometimes maybe for certain people, but at least you have that backup quarterback that you could just sub in and try to see if maybe it fixes your offense as the game goes along for maybe not only that game, but for the rest of the season. So I'd say it would be a good problem to have if you're Pittsburgh as you go along. But like I mentioned, you're the only 1-0 AFC North team after this weekend. So you got to be feeling pretty good so far about yourselves. And one of the AFC North teams we already mentioned was the Baltimore Ravens losing, but another team that lost, Cincinnati Bengals. They just continue, Johnson, to start the season off so poorly every single year in week number one. They just fall flat. And you got the better end of that falling flat this past week as the New England Patriots were able to get Gerard Mayo his first NFL coaching win in his first game with a strong defensive performance as they hold the Bengals to just 10 points and beat them by the final of 16-10 to start the young season off 1-0.
Yeah, this was the Ramondre Stevenson game.
Yes, it was.
5 yards per attempt, pretty much. 25 attempts, 120 yards on the ground, a touchdown. Obviously, he's not a receiving back. They tried it a couple times, but he was the main reason they won this game. They do not win this game without him.
Yeah.
Uh, Jacoby Brissett was passable, and what I mean by passable, he just didn't turn the ball over.
He was game manager.
Yeah, he was a game manager, and I'm of the philosophy if Jacoby started last year with that defense, listen, it's been one game. It's been one game, and we have no idea. But what we do know is Jacoby is a decent game manager, and on paper, the receiving core has been upgraded.
Listen, Jacoby had some good years in Indianapolis.
He did. I like Jacoby. I'm a big fan of
Jacoby.
I've always been a fan of Jacoby, but at this point in his career, he is not a gunslinger. He is a game manager. I don't think he's ever been a gunslinger, but he is definitely a game manager.
He is the perfect bridge gap for you guys until you start Drake May. Like this is the exact this is why I was applauding New England for starting Brissett. Because you don't necessarily have to throw because let's face facts. Remember, and we didn't put this in our rundown. I'm going to talk about it quickly. If you look what the other rookie quarterbacks did this week. You know, obviously Penix didn't start, so I won't go into that. Caleb Williams threw for under 100 yards. Bears miraculously won that game because of their defense and special teams. And then Jaden Daniels, he played pretty good. I don't think he had a bad game. It's just, the Commanders' defense sucks. They're not going to be able to contend with that. So, you're getting thrown into the fire if you're Daniels, trying to uphold that bad defense and trying to outscore your opponent every other week, it looks like at this rate. And then Caleb Williams, not a great start, and now you're playing on prime time this upcoming week. So, they got to fix those mistakes that they had. But having Brissett start for now is not a bad idea because even if the Patriots suck this season, they don't really care. They have their future quarterback. You could get someone, again, good in the top 5 of the draft. Obviously you've been mentioning Travis Hunter. You get a guy like him, I mean, that's perfect for your team because you already have, and it depends on how you use him. Like, you have a lockdown corner, Christian Gonzalez, who was a monster in this game against the Bengals. Pretty much held Jamar Chase to no catches whatsoever. And if you want to use him at corner, that's a great 1-2 bunch there. If you want to use him at wide receiver, that's pretty much your number one, I would say. So, hell, they could even use him at both. I don't even know how that would transition to the NFL. I don't see it being sustainable, but I'm sure. I'm sure they'll pick a position at least for him to start at either or. So, regardless, I think you're in a spot where if you suck this season, well, we have our quarterback and we have, a bunch of cap space as well, and we're going to have a potential top 5 pick. So New England's in a good spot right now. Even and obviously they won this game this weekend. They were one of the 3 AFC East teams to hold on for a victory this past week 1.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have too much to add over here. I think they did a fine job besides blowing up my pick'ems.
Our survivor pools were toast after the Bengals this week.
Yeah, but I mean, listen, as a fan, if you make the playoffs, that's cool, but don't win this game and then, just for like a 6-11 season, I don't want that. I'd rather you just lose out if you're going to lose out.
Right, exactly.
As terrible as that sounds.
No, I get it completely. If you want to get one of those top players, you're going to have to pretty much lose out the rest of the way. But New England's in a spot where I don't think you can really give a gauge of what they are yet because you expected them to be a bad team going into the year.
Talk to me in October.
Right.
Maybe you'll have an opinion.
Right. So there's still time to tell. Now, on the other side of the thing, for the Bengals, I get it. You didn't have T. Higgins in this game. Jamar's had his issues with injuries and then the contract talks. Burrow is obviously coming back from an injury. This is his first game back. But man, the defense looked fine. Other than they couldn't really stop the running game, which is definitely a concern. But man, their offense looked pitiful in this one. Burrow was pretty much checking down every other throw. He pretty much had the exact same similar stats to Jacoby Brissett. You saw that first game running with the Bengals, and Zach Moss had a rushing touchdown, the early touchdown in the game. They didn't really run the ball at all in this one, and the offensive line kind of struggled against the Patriots. So I don't know. It could be early me looking into this from Cincinnati, but you got to keep in mind also of you're facing the Chiefs coming this week. That's not going to be easy on the road. And then you have to, I think after that, you got to see where your team's at because you don't know what the status of Teague is going to be this offseason because he's still on the franchise tag. Jamar Chase now is under a contract spot where he has 2 years left on this deal, but he wants to get paid. He wants to be paid higher than Justin Jefferson. He even said it himself. So the Bengals are in a weird spot right now. It's honestly not a good spot you want to be in because we saw the Niners be in that spot before the season started, and they were able to get their contract extensions done. But man, the Bengals are in a really, really bad spot at this point because not only are you dealing with these injuries, but now you're also dealing with these contract talks, and you have to figure out where your team's going to go from here because you've already lost a bunch of talent that you had from that Super Bowl year that they had a couple years ago, and I don't know if it gets any much better than this. And with them, with the way the AFC North is also, you're contending with Baltimore. Pittsburgh is going to still be a very, you know, team that's going to contend with you every single week. And then I know the Browns had a bad week one performance, but they'd still probably give the Bengals a little bit of tough times. Usually they do, especially the last couple of years. So I don't know. The Bengals were a team that I think maybe a lot of people maybe expected to make the playoffs, but might be tough for them to do it this season. Going into our next game, we already kind of mentioned about what happened with Tyreek Hill. I think we don't really have to go much more further into it. I think we pretty much noted
I think we're good on this.
I think we pretty much noted down what happened. But after that whole fiasco happened, we had a game to be played in Miami between the Jaguars and the Dolphins, the Battle of Florida in this one. And a game in which Jacksonville was dominating early, Johnson. We saw it pretty much straightforward. It was at one point a 17-7 lead for the Jags and going into halftime. The third quarter is where this game took a turn. 17-7, Jaguars have the ball in the red zone. We saw Travis Etienne about to score a touchdown that would have given the Jaguars a 3-possession lead. Javon Holland makes one of the better plays defensively you'll ever see. Punches the ball out. The Dolphins recover in the end zone, force a touchback. They get the ball back. What do they do on the next upcoming drive, Johnson? Tyreek Hill, 80-yard touchdown, one play. They make it a field goal game, 17-14 going into the fourth quarter. They get 2 field goals from Jason Sanders, including the game winner as time expired. And the Dolphins come back from that 10-point deficit, almost 17-point deficit, to beat the Jaguars 20-17 and start their season off 1-0.
Yeah, very happy in South Florida. The northern half of the state, obviously near Jacksonville, not so happy.
Yeah, this is very similar to what happened for Jacksonville last season because if you remember how they collapsed last year, lost the division, these were some of the games that were happening last season and some of the stuff that was happening to them in that collapse overall.
So my question is, what's the leash on Trevor Lawrence now? Because it has to be ticking, right?
Yeah, my thing is for this game, I don't know who gets the brunt of the blame for the loss. I guess you have to put it on the offense.
You put it on the offense.
Because
if it's a 20-point game and you lose, it's on the offense.
Because I think after, they were up 10, and like I mentioned, they were about to score to make it a 17-point game. And then once Etienne got the ball punched out, their offense just was gone for the remainder of this game. For the final, 17 minutes? They had nothing going offensively. Now, again, the defense, other than that one big play for Tyreek Hill, they struggled certainly in the passing game. I mean, they gave up 338 passing yards to Tua, but they did a phenomenal job stopping the run. They gave up a goal line touchdown to Achane, but that was about it. And on their side of the field, Lawrence didn't really have eye-popping stats. The guys that we expected to maybe have a big game, guys like Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk, they were pretty much MIA in this one. They both were held to just one catch. We saw Brian Thomas get a touchdown for his first of his NFL rookie career. And then we saw a back. I think after ETN basically fumbled, they kept going to Tank Bigsby, and he got a lot of good carries in this game as well. So I don't know if that's something you have to look out for if you're playing fantasy. Maybe Tank Bigsby's a guy you want to add on your waiver wire for the remainder of the season because who knows what they're going to do. It seems as if every time we know a running back's going to be good, there's always a backup that somehow overtakes him in the starting role. And then that guy you were expecting to be good. You know, Prime example, last year's Cam Akers, where you expected him to be the running back in Los Angeles, and then it was Kyron Williams, and he was a league winner for a lot of people. Could be Tanks Bisbee this year, who knows? But I think the offense was definitely a concern in the second half, especially. A great first half offensively for Jacksonville. And like I mentioned, it was kind of what happened to them last year. Great first half of the season. The second half, horrible. And that's what cost them the division ultimately and gave Houston the opportunity to go to the playoffs. So they can't afford that the rest of the way, and they're playing Cleveland this upcoming Sunday, in which is a game that's big for both of those teams because they're both trying to avoid an 0-2 start to the season. And we'll talk about the Browns and their game from this past Sunday. But speaking of the Houston Texans, let's talk about their game with the Indianapolis Colts. A very thrilling matchup between these two teams. Finally got to score Anthony Richardson after his season ended short last year. Not a lot of passing attempts for Richardson in this one, just threw from 19 passes overall. The Texans pretty much seem to have the ball the entirety of this game. Um, but despite that, the Colts pretty much got all their touchdown plays on big um, streak plays. Like Alec Pierce got a 60
Yeah,
yard,
big plays only.
yeah, what was it, a 60-yard pass for
57, I believe. I think it was 57 and 60
it
to be
was
exact.
60 for Pierce and a 54-yarder to Ashton Doolin in the fourth quarter. So
54. Okay.
they got two big passing plays. We saw Jonathan Taylor get a rushing touchdown. We saw Richardson himself get a rushing touchdown. But the biggest takeaway from this game was we saw the Texans capitalizing with their new running game. Joe Mixon's first game with the team, he got 30 carries in this one. So they are overall to start the season. We'll see how it goes, how it all unfolds the rest of the way. But Mixon looked dominant in this game, and he might be getting a bulk load of carries as the season goes on. 30 for 159 and a touchdown. CJ Stroud threw for two touchdowns as well. We saw Nico Collins have over 117 yards, and despite not having a touchdown, still made a big impact in this game. And we also saw the debut of Stephon Diggs. He had two touchdowns in his first game with his new team. Texans held on 29-27, so they start the year off 1-0, trying to repeat as the AFC South champion. But if you are the Colts, I don't think you have to be too worried about how your team played in this one. Defense definitely could be a little bit better, but your offense wasn't as bad as maybe people were expecting it to be. I think a lot of people are still not sold on Anthony Richardson just yet, but he made two incredible throws, those two touchdown passes that pretty much shocked a lot of people with the way that he
Potential
threw
is
them.
there.
Yeah, the potential is definitely there. I think I'm curious how he plays upcoming against Green Bay and how that will transition into that game because we saw what happened with the Packers' rush defense in week one. If the Colts take advantage, give Taylor a lot of carries and then Richardson himself will probably be involved in some read options. The Colts could be in a spot where they could bounce back from this close loss and go to a 1-1 start on the season. But Houston looks pretty good so far offensively to start the season.
So Houston, we do not have a problem.
Right now, they do not have a problem, but talk to me in October, and hopefully, I won't be saying that they have a problem. That's what at least I'm hoping for what Texan fans are hoping for. Staying in the state of Texas, let's go with the next game, that being the Dallas Cowboys going into Cleveland, take on the Cleveland Browns. Uh there's not much I can really say other than the fact that Deshaun Watson looked pretty bad in this game. Two interceptions, 21 incompletions. We saw him get sacked 6 times. We saw the running game for the Browns struggle. The Cowboys pretty much had this easily. There's pretty not much really you could say about this game. Dak did all right. Zeke did all right in his first start back with the team. We saw Njoku get injured for the Browns, so pretty much an overall bad game for Cleveland. This one, they lose 33-17 the final, and It's going to be something talked about for the rest of the season because you're paying Deshaun now a different style of money. I think his contract is now involved more in guarantees after the restructuring they did this past in this past I was almost at spring training for baseball and training camp for the preseason, but it's a bad time right now for the Browns because once again they're at a spot where they might be looking at another quarterback change at the end of the season. And
So I think they're looking at it sooner than that.
you think they
And
start Jameis or someone in a couple
I
of
think
weeks?
they start Jameis. And it's painfully ironic that at the end of last season, no, 2 seasons ago, excuse me,
Yeah,
the Browns said, we need someone that's mature at quarterback. Baker isn't
Baker's
mature.
not it
And they bring in Deshaun Watson of all
after
people. Yeah, because
after a
he's a
scandal.
beacon of maturity, obviously. Not only is he have way more problems off the field than Broadway, they were going to call this guy Broadway Baker if he got drafted to the Jets because he was supposed to have all these problems off the field if he went to New York. And it seems like he's been kind of been one of the guys that's quiet. You don't really hear much about him. And in the NFL, quiet is usually better. Uh, he has gotten paid a fine amount so far throughout his career, and he seems to have a good landing spot with the Bucks. And now the Browns are stuck with this albatross of a contract, and now he's even facing more allegations of off the field. I don't even want to call them antics, but off the field crimes. And do you think this is some sort of plant now? If I was a Cleveland fan, I'd be hoping he's guilty because I would want him off my team. As
I
awful as that sounds, because you never want to wish that. That as a
I know
Cleveland fan, I would
no
hope
I know
that
what you're
the
getting at.
allegations enough would be enough to cut him from my team and start someone new.
I'm shocked he was still playing to begin with after the first set of allegations, and then someone gave him
Here
that
we are.
contract,
Yep.
and then someone traded for him. Like they gave up multiple. They gave up multiple picks, including a first rounder, to get this guy. It made no sense whatsoever. And you mentioned the Baker stuff. Like, yes, he definitely had some immature off the field stuff. But again, remember what happened to end his career in Cleveland? He had an injury that cost him a bunch of the season and made him throw a lot of interceptions when he should have not been playing. And that ultimately led him to getting, trade to Carolina. Then he gets cut from Carolina. He goes to the Rams for 2 games or whatever it was. And then now he's in Tampa Bay. And you mentioned he's in a great landing spot because he's got two good wide receivers, a solid offensive line, a decent backfield. And the Buccaneers offense is looking great. They've won a division title and they look strong in week number 1 this past week. But the Browns, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they go to Jameis either. They probably go to Dorian Thompson Robinson. Probably. I don't agree with it. They probably should just start a guy like Jameis or someone. They even have, I think they still have Tyler Huntley too. They have like 4 quarterbacks in the quarterback room because they haven't traded any one of them. But yeah, Sean Watson looked bad. He was on the same category as Daniel Jones and Bryce Young this past week. And if you're in that category, it was that bad. So Cleveland, I feel for you because you keep having this reuse, recycle, like all that's like they just keep doing this to themselves. They keep shooting themselves in the foot with quarterback. They can't find that guy, and
And they could have had it in
they
Baker.
and
They
they, and
really
they
could
had it.
have.
And that's the funny. But yeah, you're right. They had it. They had it in Baker. And I remember I wasn't a big Baker Mayfield fan going out of college, but they had the quarterback, and he won the playoff game and almost a second against the Chiefs. It made no sense. It makes no sense. Um, let's go into our Sunday night game of that week number 1, and it was another playoff rematch. We had the Rams take on the Detroit Lions. Another reunion for Matthew Stafford going back to Detroit, and Jared Goff obviously playing his former team in Los Angeles. Pretty good back and forth game between these two teams. Early on, it looked like maybe the Lions were going to overtake and pretty much handle the Rams in this one, but we saw the Lions offense kind of take a bit of a step back in the second half. A monster game for the Rams in terms of Cooper Kupp. Kind of saw maybe a rebirth of what we saw in 2021. 14 catches for 110 yards and a touchdown. Kyron Williams did all right in this game, had a rushing touchdown himself. I think the biggest takeaway for the Lions for them is Jamison Williams looked pretty good. 5 for 121 and a touchdown. And their running game just continues to look strong. Montgomery had 91 yards rushing and the game-winning touchdown in overtime. Gibbs had 40 yards and a touchdown. So it wasn't a great offensive passing scheme because we didn't see Amon-Ra St. Brown involved as much. But the Lions, they look like that team that's going to be maybe a running gun team in which they're going to be able to run the football efficiently, and people are going to have to try a scheme to stop that run. But at the end of the day, they're going to be able to pass the football easily if those teams get fooled by the run. And Detroit took advantage of that. They go down the field in overtime. The Rams were not able to get the football back, and it ultimately cost them the game. They lose 26-20 to start the year 0-1.
This is a rough one, isn't it? Like it's
I always don't like seeing a team lose after not getting the football. It sucks.
it sucks, but it is what it is.
That's the only.
Sometimes
It's the only thing I hate about overtime rules for the regular season. I like it for the playoffs, but it sucks if you're a team trying to you fought your way to get to overtime and then they don't even get a chance in overtime if you're. I mean, again, I feel bad for the offense. The defense itself could not stop David Montgomery whatsoever on that drive in overtime to get the game-winning touchdown. So that was definitely a concern for the Rams. And obviously, this game showed that the Rams are missing Aaron Donald early on because they could not stop the run, and that's the biggest guy that could have stopped the run for them in that spot.
yeah, it's a real shame. David Montgomery, is he the running back one? I certainly hope he is because I know they were kind of taking turns with him and Jameer Gibbs quarter by quarter.
I think I don't
But in
know if it's
overtime, it was all David Montgomery.
well. Remember how they started? I think it was in overtime. I think it was Montgomery was running so good on every single run that you couldn't sub him out for Gibbs. They probably are in the spot where they probably do one drive Montgomery, one drive Gibbs, and they keep going back and forth with that because that's another good problem to have. You have two good, solid running backs on your team, so you can't realistically right now go wrong with subbing them in and out or just giving them one drive and giving the next drive to the other guy. But that overtime drive was pretty much where he got his bulk of his carries and where he got the bulk of his yards. I don't think the Lions might have thrown one pass maybe on that final drive in the game, and because I think their whole drive was just them running the football down the field and getting that touchdown. So that's just also a testament to how good their offensive line is. It's probably the best one offensive line in the NFL that we have. At least I think. I think they have the best offensive line, but people might think otherwise. Um, but as I mentioned, that wasn't the final game of the week, as we obviously had Monday Night Football this past Monday between the Jets and the 49ers. Early on, after the first quarter, the Jets had some hope, Johnson. I know you don't like to hear that, but the Jets had some hope. We saw
Oh,
Aaron.
for the Jets?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, keep in mind, we saw Aaron Rodgers throw a touch. We saw Aaron Rodgers get the Jets down the field to set up a touchdown for Brees Hall. That gave him a 7-0 lead. The Niners were making 7-3. Second quarter was kind of where maybe the wheels started turning away for the Jets in this one. The Niners would go into the half with a 16-7 lead. We saw Deebo Samuel get a touchdown in that second quarter. And then the second half was pretty much the Jordan Mason show for this one. Now, if you don't know who Jordan Mason is, he was a starting running back in this game for San Francisco, due in fact to Christian McCaffrey not being able to play because he has, I believe they said, Achilles tendonitis. I believe is what they said is his current injury status right now, and which I think puts him in doubt for this upcoming Sunday against the Vikings. So Mason got the start in this one, and he had a hell of a start in this one. 28 carries, 147 yards, and a touchdown against a Jets defense that has been taunted to be maybe the best in the NFL. At least some people think that it might be the best in the NFL. And I think a big concern for the Jets is their defense was really bad in this one, and they could not get off the field on third down conversions. And their offense was all right. I think it was better than, I think it's definitely better than a lot of people were expecting it to be. We saw Alan Lazard get 2 touchdowns. Not really a big surprise considering the connections he has with Rodgers. He had a late touchdown with Tyrod Taylor. And at the end of the day, San Francisco gets the win 32-19. They start the year of 1-0. Jets, I still think it's a little bit early on to see how their season is going to be unfolding, but at least your offense looked all right. I think the biggest concern is your defense going to be like this the entire season, or is this mostly just because San Francisco is just that good of a team, so this was bound to happen at some point.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the Jets weren't ever going to be in this game. When CMC was ruled out, didn't really change my opinion all that much. I always
Yeah, it
thought that
didn't
this was
change mine
going to
either.
be an easy win, and I do want to point out that the whole debacle with who was being named starter on Friday got him in trouble with their head coach. This is a guy that
Can I can I,
uh,
can I
you
point
know
out
what?
something with
I'm not
Kyle
gonna go into
Shanahan?
this because it is complete BS that this guy got called out over this. It's not. It wasn't his fault, and then it wasn't even the media's fault. I don't think they were digging for like anything malicious. They were just trying to find out that emotional story, not so much trying to figure get an aha, gotcha. You didn't follow the
Can,
rules moment.
can I just say for Kyle Shanahan that if you're a fantasy football player with CMC, you were probably frustrated with what happened for this because I think Jordan Mason said after the game he was told on Friday night that he was going to get
He
the
does.
start.
He was.
And they
Yes.
didn't inform anyone of it until Monday night, maybe an hour or two before kickoff. So if you had CMC in your lineup, you had to pray to God that you were able to pick. You probably couldn't even pick up Jordan Mason. You probably had to. You probably just got screwed. I don't know if many people got into that spot, but Kyle Shanahan certainly is not a man of the people when it comes to fantasy football. That's for sure. But um, regardless of that, I mean, good for Jordan Mason getting that big game. Really cementing his status in this Week 1 performance. Because remember, he didn't even come into the season as the number 2 running back. He was the third string running back on this team. But then Elijah Mitchell got injured in training camp, so that let him be the backup running back, and he really showed out in this game for San Francisco. And I'm sure he'll probably be doing it again on upcoming Sunday against the Vikings. With it looks like to be CMC once again out for this upcoming week number 2. But Johnson, with that being said, let's go into the mushing hour, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This possibly might be the worst start we've ever had to a mushing hour ever in the short years that we've had here on the All Gas No Break Sports Show and picking our picks for the NFL. Considering that the best record that we had this week was 4-6 by Sean, our guest host for this past week. 2-7 for me, 2-6 for you. I can't really sugarcoat it, as I mentioned. It was not pretty. So the only thing we can
Oh
do,
no, we suck again.
the only thing we can do is try to make sure we get the people what they want. That's positive picks for this upcoming Thursday as well as Sunday. So
Let's
let's
get into
start
the
off
mushing
with
hour.
this week number 2 slate, and I'll have you pick the first game. We'll go back and forth, previewing these games.
Yes, sir. First game, we have the Buffalo Bills going into Miami to take on the Dolphins. The Dolphins are at home. The over-under is 48.5, and the Dolphins are 2.5-point favorites. This is our Thursday night game, so the only game that if you watch Red Zone like me, or if you watch your local team, they will have your undivided attention. Hopefully, it's not bad. It seems like, as a little side note, the Thursday night games so far have been good. I mean, at least on paper,
You got the
these two matchups are good.
Yeah, the Thursday night game last week was obviously good. Even the Friday night game, as I mentioned, was pretty good. And remember, this game also last season ended the regular season. It was the final game on Sunday night because it decided the AFC East winner in Week 18, I think. So that this was also a very close matchup that they had late December.
With that all being said, I'm taking Bills plus 2.5 here. Uh, I think it's going to end on something funky. Maybe someone's going to miss a field goal, or someone's going to need a field, or someone gets a touchdown, and maybe they go for a 2-point conversion. They don't get it. Something funky is going to happen here. So maybe Bills plus 2.5.
I'm gonna take the Dolphins minus 2.5, so I'm gonna fade you. And it has nothing to really. I think my issue for Buffalo is they didn't really look strong in Week 1 against Arizona. Um, I think the biggest concern also is sometimes when they play in Miami in early September, it's as if the weather gets to them. I feel like it's not only them; it's like New England. It happens to as well. It happens to a bunch of teams, and I feel like that also it pretty much plays a factor into these games, especially when it's a divisional game like this. I expect Tyreek Hill to have a pretty good game once again. I'm not as sold in the Buffalo secondary as I used to have been with this team. I think it will be a close game between the two, but I think the Dolphins win this one by a field goal. They might win it on a last second field goal once again, like they did in week number 1. So I'm gonna go with Miami minus 2.5 to start off our week number 2. Now, going into our Sunday slate, the first game that we have for the Sunday slate that we're going to be covering this week is a matchup of two 0-1 teams, certainly, but I think might be one of the games of the week that we possibly could have, and that's a divisional rival game between the Los Angeles Rams and the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals going into this game are a 1 point favorite with the over under at 48.5. This game is in Glendale. Johnson, who do you have winning this one?
Oh, Glendale, Arizona. Give me Rams plus 1.5. I feel like they're gonna come back, and I don't really trust Kyler yet. I want to say Marvin Harrison Jr. had probably the worst rookie wideout performance from a first round pick I've ever seen in my life. Uh,
Yeah, one catch for 4 yards is a tough
that
start.
was absolutely pitiful, and I know Kyler
Although,
missed him a bunch
yes,
of
although
times.
Kyron missed on a wide open touchdown,
Yeah,
so he
he
should have
did
had
miss him, so
more.
it wasn't all his fault. But you got to do better than that.
Yeah.
Until he bounces back, Rams plus 1.5.
This is tough because they just announced I think Puka Nakua is going to be out for the next 3 to 4 weeks.
At least until October 12th, I
Yeah,
believe.
so definitely losing him hurts the Rams. I mean, if Cooper Cup plays the way he did in Week 1, I think you're still going to be fine offensively. And I can't believe I'm going to say this, Johnson. I'm going to fade you again. I'm going to go with the Cardinals to win this game. I'm just going to take them straight money line. I I I I've been really sold on Arizona this season with their offense. The defense is definitely a concern, no question about it. But they probably should have beat Buffalo. I think that game just slipped away from them. I don't think they let this game slip away from them this time around. I think Kyler comes out, shows out in this one. You probably get a good game out of James Conner considering what happened with the Rams rushing attack or rush defense, excuse me, in Week 1. So I expect big games out of both Kyler and James Conner, and I think Marvin Harrison. I'm gonna make a bold statement. I think Marvin Harrison gets his first NFL touchdown in this game.
Bold of you to assume the number one option is going to get a touchdown this game.
I, I'm just gonna say it. He didn't have one in Week 1, probably should have, but I think he gets his first touchdown this week.
All right, the next game we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going into Detroit to take on the Detroit Lions. Lions at home are a 7 point favorite. 51.5 is the slated over
Moved on
under.
to the playoffs last season.
Yeah, Dan Campbell likes to go for it. So I'm gonna go for the over here, over 51.5. You're gonna see a lot of this is going to be an offensive explosion. Baker loves to throw the ball. They have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Mike Evans looking for another 1,000-yard season, which I think he's a lock for the Hall of Fame at this point. Anyone who kind of disagrees, I think you're just kind of being ignorant at that point, at least in my opinion. But I'm gonna take the over at 51.5 here.
Well, yeah, I mean, remember what happened in the playoffs for these two teams? The Lions won that game 31-23, and that was a very high scoring game, and also had some big stats for that one, including Mike Evans, who you mentioned. He had, I think, 147, something like that, near 150 yards receiving. He went off in that game, and Baker threw near 350 yards. But another story for that game was, the Lions good rushing attack. Goff was able to get a couple passing touchdowns, and the Lions were able to hold on in that one. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't. I think the 7 points for me is too close to call. So I'm gonna also agree with you. I'm gonna take the over 51.5. It's gonna be our first mush of the week, but I think you'd see a high scoring game. I'm still not sold on the Lions secondary, and I'm really not sold on the defense of the Buccaneers either. So I expect this to be a high scoring affair, as you mentioned as well. So give me the over 51.5 for Bucks and Lions. Now, our next game is I guess, I don't know if you want to call it a rivalry, but we've seen this matchup a couple times now in the last couple of years in the playoffs. And that's happening in Kansas City this upcoming weekend. That between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are going into this one a very heavy favorite, minus 6 point favorite in the spread with the over under at 47.5. Who do you have for this one, Johnson?
That is a great question. Man, this is gonna hurt, but Bengals start 0-2. Give me Chiefs -6. That hurts for me to say this, but Chiefs minus
I mean,
six. They're gonna win this game.
I don't know how much confidence you have in Cincinnati after what happened in Week 1. That's the problem. If you can't really score offensively and you only put up 10 points in Week 1, I'm not sure what you can do against the Bengals. Uh, a part of me wants to take the under, but something tells me that maybe the Bengals, if they get I think it also relies on the T Higgins plays. The T Higgins plays that maybe helps them. But I agree with you. I got the Chiefs -6 as well in this one. So after back-to-back fades of each other, now we have back-to-back mushes. So a little bit of a trend here. But let's go into our first primetime game, Johnson, of this upcoming week.
All right, so I'm gonna go do this one because it is my turn. Nick, you're gonna take us home next. We have the Chicago Bears. Caleb Williams still looking to acclimate being an NFL quarterback, but he's going to have some difficulty because he's going into beautiful, sunny Houston, Texas to take on the Texans. The Texans are about a touchdown favorite at home, 6.5 points, and the over/under slate at 45.5. This is gonna sound toxic, but I'm gonna take the under here, and I'm gonna take under 45.5 because I don't think I think the Texans will score like 28 points, 30 points, but I don't think the Bears even sniff 14. So I'm
I
taking
don't
the under at
hate it.
45.5.
I think this is a underrated defensive matchup. The Texans defense definitely struggled in week 1, but their defense is still on paper expected to be one of the better ones in the NFL. And the Bears are also another one where their defense is expected to be at one of the top ones. And they're definitely a huge reason why they won this past Sunday, including their special teams, and that went over the Titans. Uh, I will go with the Bears to cover. I'm going to pick them plus 6.5. I think they lose this game, but I think you see a better offensive game in this one from Chicago. Maybe they lean on the run a little bit more, try to get DeAndre Swift involved, but I think you maybe see a little bit better of a showing from Chicago in this one. Don't think they get the win, but at least they put up a fight and, show the NFL media in their first primetime game of the season that, listen, we might be a team that maybe at the end of the year is contending for a playoff spot in the playoffs this year. So I got Bears to cover plus 6.5. And then our final game of the week is Monday Night Football in Philadelphia. Kirk Cousins is playing on Monday night once again. He goes into Philadelphia to take on the Eagles, the Falcons, and Eagles, with the Eagles at 6.5 point favorite. 47.5 is the over under for this one. What do you have, Johnson?
Oh boy!
Kirk
After that
Cousins,
performance,
Kirk Cousins
yeah,
on a Monday night.
Kirk Cousins on a Monday night. That means Eagles minus 6.5. It's a lock. Sorry, Kirk. I think you got the you faced a really bad defense last week, and you're gonna look pretty poor this week
He faced a
because
great defense last week, and
yeah,
the
I
Eagles
mean, pretty
are
good is an understatement. So
the Eagles
good luck,
defense
Kirk.
is all right. They didn't look great in week 1, but man, I mean,
Listen, I'm a fan of Kirk
I
Cousins
know,
too.
but
So
he looked bad in that game. I don't know what it is, but I feel like the Falcons might cover in this game. I don't know how to feel about the Eagles yet. I think I'm gonna pick them to cover. I'm gonna pick Eagles minus 6.5, and that might just be because I'm trying to fully mush it and make sure that they ultimately don't cover and maybe even lose. Who knows? But I don't know. I'm still not sold on Philadelphia just yet, defensively at least. I know their offense is gonna definitely do some work in this game. And I don't know. I'm curious to see how Atlanta responds back after that debacle in week 1 because now you're going into a primetime game in one of the more hectic places in the entire NFL, probably the most hectic place in the NFL, and that's Philadelphia. And you got a new quarterback, a new head coach, new coaching staff, including OC, and you're still trying to get your guys like Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts involved in the offense. So not really a good recipe for your second game of the season going into a game like this against the Eagles. So I'll take them to cover the minus 6.5. Hopefully, Atlanta maybe pulls off an upset, and I feel better about myself for losing the pick. But with that being said, let's go to wrap up our mushing hour for week number 2, Johnson. Any final thoughts before we head into this upcoming weekend and seeing how we're going to fare for this mushing hour for week 2?
I either want the Patriots to be undefeated by October or have one win by the time October comes around. I don't want anything in the middle because that would ruin my season. I'm sure you feel the same exact way right now.
Well, the Giants are playing the Commanders this week, and usually we split both games against Washington. But after what I saw Sunday, I'm not as confident in the Giants winning any game this season. I'm just pretty down bad at this rate for the Giants. I'm hoping maybe they could pull it off on Sunday, but I don't know how much more faith I can really have in them, especially with Daniel Jones at quarterback. But I unfortunately am expecting a big game out of Jane Daniels in this one. I think he's going to have a very solid outing against New York, but maybe I could be proven wrong. Maybe the Giants get a 1-1 start to the season. At least I could be happy because I was not happy with everything that went down. 2 survivor pools lost, 2 fantasy football matchups lost, and the Giants got absolutely destroyed. So it was not a good week 1 whatsoever for me. At least for you. I know you won. Did you win both of your matchups this week?
I won one of my matchups this
You
week.
won one of your matchups. Sorry, you got 1 win, and
Yeah, one win.
your team obviously won in the regular season as well, even if they knocked you out of a survivor pool. But they won regardless, so that's
It
all that
is. It
matters.
is. It's okay.
You'll take it. It's a nice loss, even if you lost some money on it. So it is what it is at the end of the day. But we'll be back here next week for not only the NFL, but also college football. So we'll have to recap week number 3 in college football, going into week number 4 as well for the NFL, recapping week 2, heading into week number 3. And Johnson, we're getting closer to October because obviously we'll have these two sports as well as the postseason for the MLB. That's coming around the corner. I think there's only 17 games left in the MLB regular season. So we're pretty much winding down on the
March
MLB
to
regular
October
season.
starts in a couple weeks.
Yeah, so it's going to be a fun time here on the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Definitely have to tune in and listen to see what's going to be happening for the next couple weeks with the NFL, college football, and of course, Major League Baseball. But for this week's edition, that's going to do it for the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Week number 1 of the NFL season is in the books. We now head into week number 2. Thursday night, Miami and Buffalo will take place in Miami. And then our 2 primetime games of the upcoming weekend. We have Sunday Night Football with the Bears and Texans, as well as Monday Night Football with the Falcons and Eagles. We'll see how it all unfolds going into week number 3 of the NFL season. So you'll have to tune back here next week for college football and the NFL recap going into our preview. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside with Andrew Johnson with the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week.